There was a man standing in my kitchen, and I knew his eyes. That was the worst of it. Not the size of him, though he was a great deal of man to find in a one-room cottage before the sun was properly up. Not that he had wrapped himself, with what I would later learn was characteristic decisiveness, in my dead grandmother's quilt, so that the most feared wolf in the north was standing on my cold floor done up like a parcel. No, the worst of it was that I knew those eyes, pale grey, steady, too knowing. I had been looking into those eyes for 13 days, and I had told them everything. Let me be precise about everything, so that you understand the full and exact dimensions of the hole I was standing in. Every secret I had, every single one. I had told that wolf things I had never said to a living soul, because I had been entirely certain it was not a living soul that could understand me. It was a dying animal I was keeping warm, and a woman who lives alone at the edge of the woods talks to what she has. I am Orla, in case you are wondering who this fool is. 23, an omega, an herb witch by the village's reckoning, and a nuisance by their preference, living in my grandmother's cottage at the tree line, because that is where they put the ones they have no use for and cannot quite bring themselves to drown. I have a garden, 6 chickens named after members of the village council I dislike, and, as of 2 weeks ago, a wolf. I had found him at the wood's edge on a grey morning, bleeding into the frost. An enormous black wolf with a barbed arrow snapped off in his shoulder, and 3 other wounds gone the wrong colour, lying so still I thought I had come too late. A sensible woman would have backed away. A wolf that size is a wolf that has killed things larger than me. But he opened one pale grey eye and looked at me, and there was a person in there. I remember thinking that. A person, how strange. And I have never in my life been able to walk away from a hurt thing, which is the entire reason my life is the shape it is. So I dragged 40 stone of dying wolf home on a sledge made of my own door, and I did not sleep for 2 days getting the arrow out, and the poison drawn, and the wounds sewn. And when his fever broke on the 3rd night, I cried with relief over an animal I was fairly sure would eat me when it could stand. He did not eat me. He watched me. Gods, he watched me. I told myself it was a clever beast. I fed him broth from the chipped blue bowl, the only bowl I had that was big enough, setting it on the floor by the hearth and talking the whole while, because the quiet of that cottage has teeth, and talking keeps them back. I told him about my day. I told him which villager had cheated me at market. I told him my grandmother's recipes and which of the chickens was plotting against the others, and then, because he was warm and patient and could not possibly repeat it, I told him the rest. I told him I had stopped expecting anyone to choose me. I said it plainly, the way you can only say a thing to something that cannot pity you out loud. I told him that when my grandmother died the village had sent precisely no one, that I had buried her alone, and decided somewhere in the digging that I would not spend my one life waiting to matter to people who had made up their minds, and that I had made my peace with the quiet. I told him I was not sad about it. I told him that twice, which is how you know I was lying. I told him about the Alpha King, even. That is the part I would like very much to take back. I told a wolf, on the 8th night, with my hand in the fur of his neck, that the whole north feared the Iron King, and that I felt sorry for the man, because anyone that feared has no one left who knows whether he takes honey in his tea, and being known is the only warm thing there is, and a king, most of all, must be so terribly cold. I said that, about the wolf, to the wolf, while the wolf lay still as a stone, and let me say it. He could have left, you understand. That is the thing I keep coming back to. My door does not latch, it never has. I have nothing worth a latch, and a wolf strong enough to stand is a wolf strong enough to walk out an unlatched door. I left it open every night on purpose, so he would know he was not a prisoner, because I, of all people, will not be the one who cages a thing. He stayed. 13 nights he stayed, and on the coldest of them he got up from his place by the hearth and lay down along my back, and I slept curled against the warmth of him and thought, this is the most company I have had in 3 years, and it is a wolf, and I did not even have the decency to be ashamed of how much it meant. On the 14th morning I woke, and the warmth was gone, and there was a man in my kitchen, wrapped in my grandmother's quilt, looking at me with an expression I could not read at all. I want to tell you, I handled it with grace. It was not my finest hour. He did not answer. His jaw worked, the way a man's does when he has a great deal to say, and no idea which end of it to pick up first. The silence went on long enough that one of my chickens, outside, made an editorial comment. You are the wolf. The words came out flat with horror. You have been. I fed you from a bowl on the floor. I told you about the chickens. The full catalogue was arriving in my mind now, item by item, like a creditor with a very long list. I told you about my grandmother. I told you, O gods. I sat down hard on the edge of my own cot. I told you about the Alpha King. Yes, his voice was low and rough from 13 days of not being a man. You did. I told the Alpha King. I watched it land in his pale grey, too, knowing eyes, what I thought of the Alpha King. You felt sorry for him. Something moved at the corner of his mouth that on a lesser face I would have called the ruin of a smile. He takes it without honey, as it happens. The tea. And that was how I learned that the wolf I had been pouring my whole hidden heart into for a fortnight was Eirik of the Iron Territories, the most powerful wolf alive, who now knew every soft and foolish thing about me, and whom I had been keeping warm at night like a barn cat. I am going to pause here, because if I do not pause, I am simply going to keep describing my own mortification, and we will be here until spring. If you have ever said something to a person you absolutely cannot take back, if you have ever realized, one beat too late, exactly who was listening, then you already know precisely where I was sitting, and I would dearly love to hear about yours in the comments, because misery wants company, and I have a great deal of misery to share. And if you want to see how a woman climbs out of a hole this deep, or whether she does, then stay with me, and do me the kindness of following along, because the man in the quilt was about to make everything so much more complicated, and I had not even had breakfast. Now the man in the quilt. How long? The thought had arrived cold and certain. How long could you have shifted back? Truly, the wounds closed days ago. I sewed them. I watched them knit. I am not stupid even when I am being stupid. You could have stood up a man a week ago and walked home to your throne, and I would never have known I had been talking to a king. I made myself look at him. Why didn't you? For the first time, the unreadable thing in his face cracked, and what was underneath it was not a king at all. It was a man who had been asked the one question he had been dreading. Because no one has fed me from a bowl in 19 years, he said. Because you left the door open every night, and I lay there and watched you not lock it. And I understood that you were not keeping me, You were letting me stay. And there is a difference, and no one has made me that difference since I was a boy." His hand tightened on the quilt, "Because you said being known is the only warm thing there is, and you were right, and I have been the coldest man in the north my whole life, and for 13 days I was warm, and I did not want to be the king again. Not yet. Not while you still talk to me like I was someone worth telling things to." The cottage was very quiet. Even the chicken had nothing to add. "You let me think you were a dog. It was not the most important thing, but it was the thing my mouth chose. I let you think I was safe," he said. "I have never in my life been safe to tell things to. It was the only lie I have ever told that gave anyone anything." He looked, suddenly, wretched. "I see now it took something instead. I am sorry, Orla. I did not know how to stop being warm." I did not get to answer him, because that was the moment the rest of the world remembered we existed, and it remembered all at once, in the form of a man on a half-dead horse, coming up my garden path at a gallop and shouting the king's name. His name was Osric, the king's second, and he came through my unlatched door with his sword half drawn and stopped dead at the sight of his missing king wrapped in a dead woman's quilt in a witch's cottage, and the look that went over his face was almost worth the entire fortnight. "You're alive." Osric's voice broke on it. "We had the whole north dragging the river for you. Varric put it about that you were dead. He's been ruling as regent these 2 weeks. He's called the packs to the hold to confirm the succession at the next moon. He stopped. He looked at me. He looked at the bowl on the floor. He was a clever man, and I watched him assemble it. She found you. After the ambush. She's been hiding you. She has been healing me," Eirik said. "She did not know what I was." Varric. Eirik said the name like something cold settling into place. It was Varric on the ridge. I knew the fletching and would not let myself know it. My own cousin put 4 arrows in me and rode home to wear my crown. He was already a different man saying it, the quilt still around his shoulders, but the king back behind his eyes, and I understood, watching it happen, that the warm thing was over, that the boy who had not wanted to be king again was folding himself back into the cold, because the cold was needed now. How long do I have? Until the moon. 6 days. After that the packs name him, and it's lawful, and unmaking a lawful regent means a war that splits the north down the middle. Osric's gaze went to me again, and this time there was something careful in it, something that had already begun to do sums about what an outcast Omega in a king's story was worth. "Sire, if Varric learns you sheltered here, if he learns she sheltered you, he cannot let either of you be seen alive. A dead king stays dead. A king who crawls back from a witch's cottage is a king a regent has to silence, and the quickest thing to silence is her." There it was, the shape of the next 6 days, laid out on my own floor next to the chipped blue bowl. I had pulled a man out of the frost, and the price of it was that a man I had never met now needed me dead to keep a throne. Then I'll go. It came out steadier than I felt, which is a trick I learned young. You ride home, you take back your throne, and I go north into the deep woods where Varric's men don't ride, and I was always going to end up anyway. No one has to silence the witch if the witch is simply gone. I am very good at being gone. I have references. "No," Eirik said. Just that. He had said it to a wolf's worth of my secrets without a word, and now he said one word about my disappearing, and the whole cottage felt it. You do not get to decide that, I told him. You decided 13 days of my life without asking me already. You will not decide this one. You are right. He set down the edge of the quilt and stood, and even barefoot and absurd he stood, like the thing the songs are about. So I am asking, do not vanish into the woods to make my problem smaller. Come to the hold under Osric's guard, where I can put my body between you and my cousin, and let me try, badly, I have no practice at it, to be worth the thing you said about being known. His jaw did the thing again, the not-quite smile, the boy under the king. I will even tell you a secret of mine, to make the ledger less uneven. I have a great many. I have never had anyone safe to tell them to. It was, I would later learn, the most reckless thing the King of the Iron Territories had said aloud in 19 years, and he said it in a cottage that smelled of chicken and willow bark, to a woman who fed him off the floor. I went. I want to be honest that I did not go for love. I am not so foolish as that, whatever the rest of this makes me. I went because I have spent my whole life being the one who is left, and a man had stood barefoot on my floor and refused, with his whole chest, to leave me, and even knowing it was tangled and dangerous and probably doomed. I found I wanted to see, just once, what it was to be the one who got chosen instead. You may judge me. The chickens did. The hold was everything I am not. All grey stone and iron and wolves who looked at my homespun and my wood's witch hands as though I had tracked something in. Osric got us in by a low gate at dusk and hid me in the healer's wing, where at least the smell of herbs made sense, and where, over 6 days, I did the only thing I have ever known how to do in a frightening place. I made myself useful. I set a kitchen boy's broken wrist. I brought down a fever in a guardsman the proper healers had given up sweating. I talked to the people no one talks to, the underservants and the spare sons, the hold's own version of a woman who lives at the tree line. And they talked back, and that, it turned out, would matter more than anyone counted on. And Eirik came to me at night. Not the way the village would assume. I will get to the platform suitable truth of all that presently, and it is sweeter than the version they would assume anyway. He came and sat across a healer's table from me in the dark, and paid down his ledger one secret at a time, the way I had paid down mine to a wolf. He told me about the brother who should have been king and died of the wasting at 11, and how he had been raised after that as a blade is raised, all edge and no handle, because a second son, who becomes the heir, is a son nobody risks being soft with again. He told me he kept honey out of his tea, because his brother had taken it with, and he could not abide the taste of being reminded. He told me he had not meant to live through the ambush, and that lying in my frost had been the first time in years he had been glad of his own breathing. I stopped, somewhere in those 6 nights, being able to remember why I had decided not to matter to anyone. The decision simply went quiet, the way a long pain goes quiet when you are finally warm. On the 6th day Varric found me anyway, because cruel men are not stupid, and he made his move with the precision of a man who had murdered a king and not lost a wink over it. He did not come for me with a blade. He came for me with the law, which is worse. He had me brought before him in the lesser hall, the regent on the dais, my hands not yet bound, but the guards arranged, so I understood they could be. And he was charming, and golden, and looked enough like Eirik to make my skin crawl. The healer from the tree line, he said, pleasant as poison. There is a story going about that my poor cousin did not die on that ridge after all, that he has been seen, that he is being kept somewhere, addled by a woods witch who has him under her thumb and means to put a creature of hers on the wolf throne. He smiled at me. You can see how it troubles me. A bewitched king is no king. If such a witch existed, the Pax would expect her burned before the naming, for the good of the bloodline. Tell me, girl, should they find her, this witch, what do you imagine they ought to do with the king she ruined? It was clever. I will give the dead that much. He could not admit the king lived without admitting he had lied, so he was building the cage in advance, so that when Eirik walked into the great hall at the naming, the story would already be waiting. Not a king returned, but a king bewitched, and a witch to burn, and Varric the loyal cousin, who saw it clearly. Nearly all of it was already in place. I could feel the hall believing it. An outcast Omega is the easiest thing in the world to make a story believe. My voice did the steady trick again, Gods bless it. I imagined that they ought to ask the witch what she pulled out of him. A woman who ruins a king, and a woman who saves one leave different things behind. Ask me what I pulled out of your cousin's shoulder, my lord. I kept it. Healers keep what they pull from a wound, to know the hand that made it. Something flickered in his golden face. He had not expected the witch to have a line of her own. Bind her, he said, and dropped the pleasantness entirely. She'll say her piece at the naming, where the Pax can watch it fail. That was the first move, and it nearly carried. I spent the night before the moon in a cell with my hands bound, listening to a hold-fill with Pax, who had already half heard that there was a witch among them, and learning that the most dangerous thing in the world is not a blade. It is a story told first. But Varric made one mistake, the mistake his kind always make. He thought the spare people did not count. He had me guarded by an underservant whose fever I had broken 3 days before, and that boy ran a message through the low passages no lord remembers exist, to the healer's wing, to Osric, to a king who had spent 6 nights learning he was allowed to be warm and had no intention of going cold again. The naming was held in the great hall at the rise of the moon. Every pack of the north packed shoulder to shoulder, the wolf throne empty, and Varric standing before it, in his cousin's colours, with my fate already written into his pretty speech. They brought me out bound, to be the proof of his story. I want you to picture it the way it was, the lowest woman in the room, in homespun, hands tied, set before the most powerful gathering in the north, so that a murderer could point at me and call me the reason the king was gone. He got 3 sentences into it. Then the great doors came open, and Eirik walked into his own hall alive, and the sound the Pax made was the sound a forest makes when a fire goes through it. Varric recovered fast. I told you he was not stupid. You see, he cried, wheeling to the hall. Bewitched, befogged, paraded by the very witch who held him. Look at him. Look how she's hollowed him out. Seize her, seize the creature, and the gods forgive me. We may yet save what's left of my. Ask her what she pulled out of me. Eirik's voice went down the hall like cold iron. He did not shout. He had learned, somewhere, that a quiet voice in a loud room is the one thing a crowd cannot resist, or perhaps he had learned it from a woman who used it on a wolf. She offered you the question in your own lesser hall yesterday, and you bound her rather than hear it. Orla, tell the Pax what you took out of my shoulder while I bled on your floor. My hands were bound, so I did the only thing I could. I had it in my fist, where they had not thought to look. because no one searches an Omega's clenched hand for a weapon that is only the truth. I opened my fingers and held it up, the barbed black-tipped arrowhead I had drawn out of a dying wolf 2 weeks before and kept, the way I keep everything I pull from a wound. This, the hall leaned in to a small voice the way it never would have leaned toward a loud one. Barbed, to tear coming out, blacked at the tip with monksherd boiled in oil, which is a poison, and a particular one, and an expensive one, and it is fletched green and grey. I turned, slowly, and I looked at the regent in his cousin's colours. Only one house in the north fletches green and grey, my lord. Yours. I did not bewitch your king. I sewed up the 4 holes your archers put in him, and I kept the proof, because I am a witch, and that is what we are actually for. I lifted my bound hands a little higher, so all of them could see the thing. Your king did not wander off and let a woods witch ruin him. Your king was shot from a ridge and left for the frost by the man standing on his throne, and the only reason he is breathing in this hall is that the lowest woman in the north could not walk past a hurt thing. The hall did not roar. It went silent, which is so much worse, the silence of hundreds of wolves all turning to look at one golden man at the same time. And Varric, who had murdered a king without losing sleep, did the last desperate sum of his life and decided that one more death would settle it. He came off the days fast with a blade out of his sleeve, straight at Eirik, because a dead king is still a throne and he had nothing left to lose. And I was closer, and my hands were bound, but my body was not. And I did the only thing a person who cannot walk past a hurt thing ever does. I got between them. The blade went across my forearm instead of into the king's heart, a long bright line of cold that turned warm and red in the same breath, and I gripped the edge of the dyer's step with my bound hands as my legs went strange, the stone biting into my palms, and I thought, with the clarity that comes at such moments, that I had survived a fortnight of a secret king only to be stabbed at a party. Then the wolf came. Eirik shifted between one stride and the next, the black wolf I had nursed exploding out of the man, and he took his cousin down in front of every pack in the north, and it was over very quickly, and I will not dwell on it, because the songs dwell on it enough, and the songs always miss the part that mattered. The part that mattered came after. The hall full of the most powerful wolves in the world, the regent dead, the throne won back, and the great black wolf, blood in his fur, turned away from all of it. He left the throne empty behind him. He came down off the dais, past the lords and the warriors and every wolf who outranked me by the length of the world, and he crossed the whole silent hall to where the lowest woman in it sat bleeding on the steps, and he lay his great head down in my lap, in front of all of them, and chose me where every single one of them could see him do it. There is no greater thing one of them can do. To select the least person in the room, in the open, before everyone who outranks her, it unmakes the whole order of their world. I sat on the cold steps with my torn arm and a king's wolf in my lap, and I felt the north rearrange itself around us, and I understood, finally and completely, what it is to be chosen instead of left. He shifted back with my grandmother's habit of decisiveness, someone's cloak thrown round him, and he knelt on the bloody step and took my bound hands in both of his and cut them free himself, and the thing he had been unable to read on his face that first morning in my kitchen was not unreadable any more. It was perfectly, terribly plain. Everyone could read it. That was the point. "I have a secret," he said, low, just for me, in a hall straining to hear. "I have known it since the 8th night, when you told a wolf you felt sorry for the king, and I have been afraid of it ever since, and I am done being afraid of warm things. Whatever he said next I will not give you all of, because some things are mine, but it was a declaration, raw and unguarded and costly, said on his knees, on a bloody step in front of the assembled North, by a man who had been raised to have no handle, and was offering me one anyway. And when he was done, he did not wait for the hall's permission. He kissed me there on the steps, once, and the only way I can describe what broke open in me is that I stopped, after 23 years, being someone who lived at the edge of things. Then he stood and turned and told the North that the woman bleeding on his steps was his chosen mate and their Luna, and that he would hear the throat of anyone who had a feeling about it. No one, it turned out, had a feeling about it. It is remarkable how few feelings people have when the alternative is a king's teeth. Here is how it is now, since you have come all this way, and I think you have earned the warm part. The chipped blue bowl sits on a shelf in the great hall of the Iron Territories, between a war banner 300 years old and a sword that took a city, and visiting lords do not know what to make of it and are too frightened to ask. I know what to make of it. I fed a king off that bowl when I thought he was a dog, and he has never once let it be moved, because he says it is the only crown in this hold that was given to him for nothing. The door to our chambers does not latch. He had the latch taken off himself the first week, and when I asked him why, he said, "So you always know you are not being kept." And then he had to leave the room for a moment, which is a thing he does when he has said something truer than he meant to. He takes honey in his tea now, just lately. He will not discuss it. And the secrets, every single one of them, the chickens and the grandmother and the years I spent deciding not to matter, turned out to be the foundation he built the whole thing on, because it transpires that the most powerful wolf in the North did not fall for a Luna or a noblewoman or a girl in white on a dais. He fell for a woman talking to a wolf in a cold cottage with the door left open, saying true things into the dark, because she thought no one was listening. Someone was listening. That is the entire story. Someone was finally listening. So tell me, and I genuinely want to know, because the fire is low and there is a wolf asleep across our unlatched door like the world's largest and most unnecessary guard dog. Did you guess, before I did, what I was really keeping warm? And what would you have done on the 14th morning with a king in a quilt and every secret you had already given away? Tell me where you are listening from tonight, and whether you would have run for the deep woods or stayed for the man, because I have a wager with a sleeping king about which kind of person finds their way to the end of a story like this one. And if a woman who could not walk past a hurt thing and got a kingdom for the failing is a thing you would like more of, then stay. Leave the door open, follow along. I have a great many secrets left, and these days, it turns out, I have somewhere warm to tell them.